Good evening to everyone, and we want to welcome you to our first session on this exciting journey that we're doing together as a church family, Christian discipleship training. And again, I'm excited that everyone that's here and all those that will continue to join. And I know that during this course of study, if you apply yourself and follow the guidelines and do whether you're in the rooted study as well, or if not even just this discipleship training, you take it in and apply it, that you will learn from it. You may also be challenged by it, but you also will definitely grow. And I like this little road that's on here because you see it has some short little hills on it. And you may find out through the course of this journey that there are some hills that may come up, maybe some curves, but God will take us through each one of those and will help us to overcome, and that we will learn all that we need to be so that we can understand about what it means to be a disciple and then to be able to make disciples. If you go to the next slide. So we want to talk a little bit in the beginning about what is the God-given purpose of the local church. And again, you probably can answer this since we're talking about being a disciple. But one of the things that we want to look at and just take a few moments to glean is when we talk about the purpose of the local church, we want to look at, how effective is the local church being? How effective is Northeast being as reaching its God-given purpose? How effective are churches in general, the body of Christ? And so as we look at and think about how do we measure the effectiveness or the result of what the God-given purpose is, we can kind of look at some statistics and see from those statistics how well the church is faring. And we're looking at this from a general standpoint. And again, when we're looking at effectiveness, we're looking at how well are we making disciples? How well are we taking those that come and give their life to Christ? How are we doing getting them to be able, helping them to be able to conform to the image or likeness of Christ? And so with that, we look at some statistics to see how's the church doing today. And we see here from the statistics, it says that there's a little difference between the behavior of Christians and non-Christians. So clearly it relates to the first bullet that something must be wrong or going on in the church today because we aren't being as effective. So sometimes it's hard to tell who are Christians, who are non-Christians by the way they behave, how they talk, how, again, act. Also, the divorce rate are about the same between Christians and non-Christians. The percentages of men who regularly view pornography are roughly the same. Domestic violence, drug and alcohol abuse, and most other problems are just as prevalent among Christians as among non-Christians. And as we are those that have been set aside, that are separate and sanctified, our lives should be different and reflective of Christ in our life and should not be the same as non-Christians. And then the last two statistics talks about 1 in 4 people living together outside of marriage call themselves evangelicals. And then the last bullet says, significant number of young adults believe evangelical churches are not even Christ-like. I want to make sure we don't get hung up on evangelicals because we can think of, again, evangelicals as a subset of the overall Christian denomination. But again, this applies to us even as Baptists. So don't get hung up on, hey, this is evangelicals, it's a different group. We're talking about churches in general, as well as, again, our local church and related to us in Northeast as well. So next slide. So again, as we are looking at this question, there is hope for us. Hope for us is in the church, hope for us as Christians, and certainly hope for those that are in the world that have not given their life to Christ. Because again, the hope of this world is in the local church. And the answer to the question about what is our God-given purpose is discipleship. Discipleship is God's given purpose. So we are here to, one, be disciples, but then also to make disciples. And again, that has a connotation of being Christ-like. And so if we want to have effective change in our church, in our communities, and throughout, then we have to change how we're doing discipleship. And that we need to have a model that more aligns with how Jesus did discipleship. And we'll talk about that in the subsequent slide. So we can see from how Jesus did discipleship, it was more a relational model. And this model is timeless and it provides the best methodology for discipleship. And again, the Word of God gives us our guidance and our direction of how to design this good working model within this for discipleship. And the best way to do it is to have a clear, uncomplicated way to train people to be spiritually mature, to fully devote themselves to be followers of Christ, and to begin be disciples who make more disciples. Our commission statement tells us to go out and make disciples, but we first have to be a disciple before we can go out and make others or others to become disciples. So again, this is why we're doing this, why we're doing it now. We had our evangelism class a few years ago, and we said we were following discipleship, and God has worked out the timing, and this is it. So we're excited about what we're doing and how we'll be growing within this period of time. We go to the next slide. So here on this slide, the first bullet says, let's start with a question of focus. In the book that we're referencing, Discipleship, 5 Steps to Help Your Church to Make Disciples Who Make Disciples. In the book, the authors highlights 4 categories of churches. And under each category, he lists what is a focus and what is the methodology. And so the first category is educational. And this is a model I think we're all familiar with. The focus of the educational is a pastoral educational teaching. The methodology is classroom. Very familiar with how Northeast is set up. We have Sunday service, we have Sunday school, we have Bible study groups for all different ages, Wednesday night Bible study for adults and young adults. The classes and course and direction to some degree is come down from the pastor, even though there's others that provide input and carry it out. But a lot of this, again, is based on the Bible study and Christian doctrine. And it goes to try to attract, again, new people. And so we bring people in as kind of more intrinsic church or centered within the church focused. And by it is a lot of large Bible studies. And through that, we hope we're making disciples. And another category is attractional, where again, the focus is attractional. The methodology is entertainment. These type churches try to get people in through live events, through other church services and inviting people in. And they're hoping again, as people get a life to Christ, they will fall into become disciples, more or less. The next one is missional, which that's the focus. The methodology is to serve an opportunity for service. And they're more about the social justice side of church. They're out more contemporary style, and they're doing a lot of outreach. And then the last one is what they call organic or home. And the focus is fellowship, and again, the methodology is organic. And they're trying to get believers to come in and for teaching, worship, service, and fellowship. All of these are good models. All of these, even though churches may be predominant in one of these versus the other, they may pull in items from other categories. I mean, as we're educational, we still do outreach. We still are trying to reach out our youth and young adults. But the thing of it is that it doesn't allow for really the discipleship piece of it, because the discipleship is kind of left at, oh, we hope as people study and if you're in study groups that you grow and become a disciple. And as we see here from some of the bullets, that as here, churches are full of Christians, but not disciples. And then there is a big difference between the Christian and being a disciple. A disciple is one that is following Jesus, not only trusting him for their life and salvation, but truly following him. Also, focusing to fulfill their life by allowing Jesus to lead and guide them. And again, with the idea of conforming to the image of Christ. In this is the third bullet, that we're not commanded to make Christians, in the sense of Christians doesn't hold the Christ likeness as it did in Acts when they were called Christians. We're commanded again not to make converts, but to make disciples. In the Bible, there's disciple is used 270 times, but Christian only 3 times. So again, our God-given purpose is to make disciples. And so we want to be, as it says here, intentional about our discipleship strategy. And so the 4 models or categories we talked about deals more with what we do, and we teach, again, all of those are good and right things that we need to do, but it's not intentional in discipleship. And so we have developed a strategy following Jesus' example. Jesus taught to a multitude of people. He taught to the 5,000, fed the 5,000. But when he was going to make disciples, he called a group of 12. And out of this group of 12, he ministered to them. They heard the teachings with the entire body of people that would come in the multitude. But then he had the small group sessions with them where he taught them, gave them, his commandments. They could learn about Jesus, learn about what they would be doing once he leaves. And so we're going to be about, over the next few weeks and months, about learning how to become disciples, and then how do we make others into disciples, make disciples. And then the last 2 bullets under the intentional says, we have a plan to make disciples of Jesus Christ in the power of the Spirit to the glory of God. And our ultimate goal is to be producing followers of Christ who are being transformed into his image, from Romans 8:29. And you hear me pray that a lot, talk a lot about we need to be conforming to the image of Christ. So, next slide, Reverend Feast. So what you can expect to come out of our sessions from this in March for the discipleship training, and then for the rooted. Well, what we expect to come, or the results we like to see, is a more intentional next level focus on discipleship. Also, we're going to be learning more about small groups and small groups approach to discipleship making, which again is going to be our primary tool and use a way of discipling one another. And we're going to start this through the rooted study. Again, I know a lot of you signed up for the rooted study, which is good. We know some are only taking the discipleship class, which is also good. And hopefully in the future, those that didn't take the rooted, you'll have an opportunity to sign up later for rooted. But through the rooted study, we expect to develop a deeper root in God and in his word, experience the relational small group. That again, in this for focus and methodology of this small group relational that Jesus modeled, the focus is biblical discipleship and the methodology is relational environments. So you will get to see and feel and experience the relation in a small group. Then we're looking to launch some initial small groups within Northeast. so that we can continue building, continue growing as disciples and conforming to the image of Christ. And then lastly, we will train future small group facilitators and leaders, because we want to be replicating disciples, and as well as replicating facilitators and leaders. Thank you.